The sound of the ferry's engine was the only thing louder than the silence that followed when someone said the words Rikers Island. For decades, that name meant one thing: fear. But in 2019, when New York City's leaders announced their plan to finally shut it down, the island woke up again, not in peace, but in panic. Rikers wasn't just a prison. It was a world unto itself: 400 acres of crumbling concrete, rusted fences, and broken promises, sitting quietly in the East River between Queens and the Bronx. Generations of inmates had passed through its gates, many awaiting trial, most forgotten. And as reformers began to push for closure, the people who knew Rikers best, the guards, the inmates, even the families, knew that ending it wouldn't be as simple as locking one last door. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this one only gets darker. In 2015, Kalief Browder's story broke the nation's heart. A teenager jailed at Rikers for a crime he never committed, left in solitary for months, and released only after his spirit was already shattered. His story became the spark that ignited a movement, one that called Rikers what it truly was: a symbol of everything wrong with mass incarceration. But what happens when you try to dismantle a symbol? When you threaten to erase an entire system that's been built on chaos, politics, and profit? By 2019, the city council had a plan: build 4 smaller, humane borough-based jails, and shut down Rikers by 2027. It sounded like progress. The mayor called it a new era of justice. But behind the speeches and the hashtags, tension was growing, both inside and outside the island's razor wire. Correction officers saw the plan as betrayal. "You think closing Rikers will fix the streets?" one union rep shouted outside City Hall. "You're dreaming. You're just moving the problem." Inside the walls, inmates heard rumors that they'd be shipped across the city, scattered into new facilities, or worse, forgotten in overcrowded units until the very end. As debates played out on TV, Rikers itself began to fall apart. Staff shortages turned into riots. Fights over food and power became daily routines. Whole housing units went unsupervised for hours. The island was rotting from the inside, and everyone knew it, but no one could stop it. To the public, Rikers' closure was a promise of reform. To those inside, it felt like an execution countdown. In September 2021, just weeks after another inmate died in his cell, the city's Jail Oversight Board released a statement: Rikers is in a state of emergency. But even as journalists exposed the horror and lawmakers demanded answers, no one could agree on what shutting Rikers really meant. Would it be justice for those who suffered there? Or just a clean way to bury a dark legacy under new concrete and slogans? That question haunted everyone connected to the island, from the families of inmates still waiting for court dates, to the politicians who had built careers on fixing the system. Because deep down, they all knew something the headlines didn't say out loud: closing Rikers might change where people were locked up, but not why. And one night, as the city slept and the ferry lights flickered against the water, something happened inside those walls that would change the debate forever. It wasn't a riot. It wasn't a protest. It was something quieter and far more dangerous. It began with whispers, passed between correction officers during shift changes, then carried cell to cell like ghost stories. Something had gone missing inside Rikers. Not a weapon. Not an inmate. Something worse: the records. One Friday morning, a young officer named Daniel Ruiz walked into the intake office and found the computer servers offline. Every digital log from the past 6 months, disciplinary reports, medical complaints, even death investigations, had vanished. The official explanation was system maintenance. But Ruiz, who'd spent 5 years patrolling the island's echoing corridors, knew better. The truth was that Rikers didn't need anyone to hack it. It was collapsing under its own corruption. While City Hall was selling the closure plan as progress, insiders were busy rewriting history. Files that detailed inmate abuse, falsified reports, and violent staff misconduct quietly disappeared. Guards who should have faced suspension were transferred. Inmates who'd filed complaints were suddenly marked as uncooperative. The island was scrubbing itself clean, erasing the sins before the world could see them. Outside the walls, reform advocates were fighting a different battle. They called it the end of the Rikers era, but the deeper they dug, the more they realized that Rikers wasn't just a place, it was a system of people protecting people. Politicians protecting donors. Unions protecting guards. Bureaucrats protecting their own careers. Inside, the pressure was reaching a breaking point. That same week, an inmate named Terrence T.J. Hayes, a soft-spoken 28-year-old held for a parole violation, disappeared from his housing unit. Cameras caught him leaving his dorm just after lights out. He never made it to the yard. The next morning, his cellmate whispered to a nurse that TJ had been taken. The nurse filed the report. Hours later, that report was gone too. When the Board of Correction demanded answers, the Department of Correction said the footage was corrupted. But the guards on that unit, every single one, were suddenly reassigned. For years, Rikers had been the kind of place where bad things happen quietly. But now, with reporters digging and activists watching, the quiet was getting harder to keep. Council member Yvonne Morales, one of the loudest voices for closure, began receiving anonymous letters. Handwritten. No return address. The first one read, "If you want to shut us down, you better know what's buried here." She ignored the first note. Then came the second, attached to a photocopy of an old inmate complaint from 2018, signed by Terrence Hayes. The more she investigated, the more walls she hit. City documents sealed. Union representatives refusing to testify. But one retired captain agreed to talk, on the condition of anonymity. He said something she would never forget: Rikers isn't closing. It's relocating. They're just moving the same people, same corruption, into new buildings. You can't shut down what's already inside the system. As the hearings continued, tension spread through the island like a fever. Guards stopped showing up. Inmates ran their own units. Emergency calls went unanswered. Ambulances lined up at the gate. Every headline read the same: Rikers in crisis. And while the city promised reform, the truth was already leaking out. Those missing records, those letters, they pointed to something buried deep beneath the island. A secret that could derail the entire closure plan. The night before the city council's final budget vote, Morales received one last message slipped under her office door, a single photograph. It showed a concrete corridor half flooded with water, pipes leaking from the ceiling, and on the wall, faint under the grime, for words spray-painted in black: "The island remembers everything." That same night, the power at Rikers went out. When the lights went out, chaos moved in. Cells unlocked. Radios died. For 5 full minutes, Rikers Island disappeared into darkness, and in that silence, everyone felt the same fear: the island wasn't letting go quietly. By dawn, the generators hummed back to life, but something had changed. The missing inmate, the vanished records, the anonymous threats, all of it led Councilmember Morales to one truth: Rikers wasn't broken by accident. It was being buried alive. She leaked the photograph to the press. Within hours, headlines exploded: "Cover up at Rikers." The mayor denied everything, but federal investigators moved fast. Subpoenas landed. Whistleblowers talked. The files, thousands of them, were traced to an off-site storage warehouse run by a private contractor tied to city officials. The closure plan suddenly looked less like reform and more like a shell game. The same officials who vowed to end Rikers were hiding its sins under new walls and new names. As pressure mounted, the city promised transparency. But Morales knew better: you can shut down buildings, not memories. Rikers was more than steel and concrete, it was a mirror of the system that built it. In 2025, the first borough-based jail opened. It was clean, bright, and quiet. But when the first inmate stepped inside, a guard whispered the old phrase under his breath: "Welcome to Rikers." Because the island may sink, the buildings may change, but the cycle remains. And the truth? Rikers never really closed. It just changed its zip code. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.